It's marking 30 years since a death that rocked the Highview Fire Department and this community. A 24-year-old volunteer firefighter succumbed to his injuries after running into a burning home. He had to be carried out after smoke filled his lungs.
The death is still difficult for his fellow first responders, the men who were there with him that night and in the days that followed. Because this fire wasn't accidental, it was arson. And 3 decades later, no one has been held accountable. Photojournalist Jessica Farley and I talked to his friends, firefighters who have worked hard to honor his legacy.
We gather and we wonder what happened a couple of weeks ago. We're confused, we're saddened, and we're angry. We wonder why.
I can remember it like yesterday.
At just 24 years old, Craig Drury's death left his community stunned.
You can see it in the eyes of a lot of folks. They were hurting, and they still hurt today.
The fearless firefighter ran into a burning home on August 24th, 1994. He was a volunteer who didn't hesitate. But this fire was powerful. A chemical cleaning agent poured throughout the home, igniting what's called a flashover.
We got there too fast. We were entering that house before its full ignition had happened. So there were still chemicals in there. And when it lit up, there was just no going back.
Craig went unconscious and had to be pulled from the flames. His injuries so severe, a rescue helicopter was called in, working to get him to the burn unit as fast as possible.
He wrote on a notepad while he was in the hospital. He couldn't talk. He was intubated. He wrote, "I'm sorry." For what? You didn't do anything, Craig. You were just doing your job.
And Rick Larkins, chief at the time, was trying to do his. It was a balancing act, holding on to hope for Craig's recovery, keeping morale up in the Highview firehouse while working to find out what caused this fire.
This thing was so involved. There were so many detectives.
12 days later, September 5th, Craig succumbed to his injuries.
The passing of Sergeant Craig Drury is felt by all the firefighters here at Highview and beyond.
Craig was to be married the day he was buried. To think about it, his life was ended over somebody setting a house on fire.
Within days of Craig's death, the investigation was all hands on deck. Not only arson teams, but homicide investigators from the Jefferson County Police Force.
They sent every detective they had.
And the pieces started coming together. Detectives identified a fire accelerant, a cleaning solvent used for industrial equipment.
Somehow it got from the garage to pour it all over inside of the house.
Next, they found suspects.
We already knew in our minds who did it, just by the evidence we had seen as we were helping them investigate the fire.
Still, they couldn't get an arrest.
The evidence was there, but it wasn't as concrete as it needed to be.
It was frustrating, he says. Everyone believed they had the pieces, but couldn't finish the puzzle. Ultimately, it was a risk prosecutors weren't willing to take.
It was one of those things, if we take it to court and we lose, it's over.
Billboards begged for new clues as every August brought back the bad memories.
A lot of firefighters can go through their career and never have a tragedy like that.
The pain is still palpable 30 years later. They have not been able to close this case, but the team has found ways to honor Craig and make sure young firefighters are better prepared.
We tell firefighters this is the floor that you would normally be on.
This is a training prop for flashovers, the very thing that killed Craig. His fellow firefighters advocated for it after his death. Now, all firefighters in the training academy learn the 4 signs of a flashover before they'll ever face one.
We teach that today, but we didn't teach that back then.
Keeping Craig's legacy alive is important to the men he served with.
As long as I'll live, his memory will stay alive, whether it's in teaching other firefighters or just telling what a great person he was.
A promise he made in the name of service from one first responder to another. Well, all of the detectives, and there were a lot of them, that worked this case back then have since retired, but it's still considered an open homicide case under investigation by the Louisville Arson Unit.